President Trump says there is room for compromise on a major infrastructure bill, but judging from Obamacare and the new tax reform law, there has been zero appetite for bipartisanship when it comes to big legislation. We recently sat down with former U.S. Congressman Jason Altmire, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. He's the author of the new book, Dead Center: How Political Polarization Divided America and What We Can Do About It. Altmire served 3 terms from 2007 to 2013 and was known as a centrist. We started by asking him what that was like in the current political climate.
Well, that's what the book is about. You have accountability to your constituents. I had a district that was evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. Everything I did made half my constituency angry or half of them happy. I had a representative in Washington, leadership in Washington, that I had to be accountable also as a member of the Democratic Party. But what you find is you try to work with the other side. You try to make things in a way that you can compromise, and it's just impossible to do that on Capitol Hill today, because you have a situation where we elect people from the extremes. Most people in the country are in the center. They find themselves waking up every day thinking about things other than politics. When they do think about it, they want a Congress that can work together, can compromise and get things done. That's not what we have. We have a system where we elect people on the extremes, and the people that we're sending to Washington are not representative of those people in middle America who just want a Congress that can get along and get things done.
So would you put gerrymandering at the top of the list for what ails Congress right now?
Well, it's interesting. I lost my seat in large part because of gerrymandering, so I did have the feeling that that was... Well, right, when I started to write the book. But over the 2-year process that I researched it, I found out gerrymandering is more of a symptom than the actual problem. The biggest problem is that we're electing people because of our closed primary system who are from the fringe of both political parties.
And so then what is the impact on that when it gets down to discussing, let's say, a tax bill, for example? What is the impact on those negotiations?
Well, the impact is compromise has become a dirty word. You're actually punished for working with the other side. You have people in Washington, a very small group of people who would like to work together and get things done, but for the most part, the people who are in the leadership especially, and the people who are driving the train down the tracks, they don't want you to work together, and you're punished both in Washington and back home for having the idea of working with the other side.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I beg your pardon.
You first, Peggy.
Okay, mine is quick. When I was a little girl, I loved to read about history. I'll never forget reading about Daniel Webster, the great compromiser. That was a compliment. Right. His portrait is in the U.S. Senate gallery because we know to this day he was a great man. He was a great man because he forced people who disagreed terribly before the Civil War to come together and keep the Union going, keep the nation going. Okay, at what point in your career did you understand compromiser is not a compliment now? Compromiser means gutless and possibly immoral. At what point did you know this?
Almost immediately. I came in with the Democratic wave of 2006, and that wave was driven by independent voters, an 18-point swing in independents, centrist candidates being elected to office. And the first thing we encountered in Washington was people from the far left Democratic side saying, put this idea of bipartisanship to the side. That's not why you're here. You're here to push the Democratic agenda. And what you find in that atmosphere is if you are tagged as somebody who's bipartisan, who likes to compromise and work with the other side, they will use it against you, as I found in a later primary.
And it's only gotten worse in the 10 years since, hasn't it?
Exactly.
So a little more than 50 years ago, we had life-altering, culture-changing legislation passed. Medicare, Medicaid, voting rights, civil rights. We all realize, in reality, none of that could happen today. But today, in the Congress that you served in, how much of a negative influence, forget the extremes on both sides, how much of a negative influence with things like Twitter and Facebook?
I have a lot in the book about social media and the impact that that has had. It's had a positive impact for some in that you could have people who in the U.S. Senate in particular would have been backbenchers for many years, have been able to promote themselves. Both parties have seen this. But you also have the negativity and the worst of America. In the introduction to my book, I talk about the Pulse shooting in Orlando and the response. You saw the best of America with the first responders and the people lining up to give blood and giving more money than they they were capable of giving and everything they did to help, you also saw the worst of America in the response, in casting blame and pointing fingers and trying to gain political advantage and figuring out a way that you could use a tragedy to gain political advantage. And unfortunately, social media is where that plays out.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us. The book is Dead Center: How Political Polarization Divided America and What We Can Do About It.